Welcome and thank you for joining this open Zoom on Emissions Reduction Plan Advice for 2023 and our content on waste and F gases. My name is Sam King and I'm facilitating this session. I'll explain how the session runs in a second, but first I'd like to invite Bevan to say an opening karakia.
Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou I runga I te pā ka whakata reo nei a tēnā koutou katoa. Paua ki runga, paua ki raro, ruia, tuia, kōkiritia, kia mau, kia u, kia ora ai. He pikinga ki te rangi, kia tū I tāiao. He pau e hora, he pau a rangi, kia hora a papa. Haumi e, hui e,
Tai ki.
So just the relevance of that karakia to today's mahi. It speaks to our organisational name, He Pau a Rangi, which communicates the sacred bond between Rangi Nui, the sky, and Papa Tuanuku, the earth. Pau means to support, or metaphoric post, or a gathering of people to support a cause, or to put a stake in the ground. Kōkiritia is to champion a cause, and hora is to make public or put on display, which is what we're doing today, all relevant to this kōrero. So, tēnā koutou. Kia ora.
Cool, so thank you very much, Bevan. I'll shortly hand over to Emma to give us a short presentation, but first I'll explain how things are going to run today. So we'll have questions and answers at the end. Please put your question in the Q&A section of the webinar. We'll try to get to every question, but if we don't have time to get to yours, please feel free to email us at hello@climatecommission.govt.nz. We'd also love to know who's joining us today, so if you could put your name and organisation, if you feel comfortable, in the chat section, we'd really appreciate that. Also, a reminder, this session is recorded and it will be made available on the Commission's website afterwards. With that, I'd like to invite Emma Richardson to kick us off.
Sam, I'll just give a short presentation now before our Q&A. I'll just be talking initially about our role and our work program, and then I'll speak to the draft chapter, waste and F gases. Slide change, please. The Commission was created in 2019 with the passing of the Zero Carbon Bill, which amended the Climate Change Response Act. Our roles under the Act are varied, but the factors we must consider are detailed and specific. As part of this, the Act requires the Commission to consider the Crown-Māori relationship, Te Ao Māori, and specific effects on iwi Māori in the advice we give to the Government. We are an independent Crown entity with an advisory role within the wider system for climate change policy in New Zealand. We provide regular, independent, evidence-based advice to the Government on climate change action and monitor the progress towards our climate goals. As part of this, we assess the adequacy of government action and we share our conclusions publicly. The conclusions and recommendations of the Commission are made by a board, not by a government minister or by the Cabinet. These conclusions and recommendations are founded on science, evidence and analysis, and importantly, also based on the input of stakeholders and the people of New Zealand. We provide advice in a manner that supports future pathways that are responsible, fair and sustainable. We realise that it is important that these pathways do not broaden current inequalities. Rather, our pathways forward need to work alongside efforts to address other wellbeing challenges like healthy housing, urban form and the future of transport, as well as the state of our natural environment. We know the transition to low emissions and climate resilient society brings a mix of opportunities, benefits, challenges and costs, and the effects, good and bad, will be felt by all of us. Slide, please. We're currently consulting on the draft advice to Government on the direction of policy for actions New Zealand must take to meet its climate goals and address climate change. It is in the role of Government to decide on specific policy choices and to give effect to the emissions reduction plan. It's important that our advice reflects what people are experiencing and care about, and having input from people is vitally important to us. We want to know if you think our recommendations reflect the correct path New Zealand should be taking to reduce emissions to meet our legislative targets. Once we have incorporated what we have heard through the submissions process, our final advice is due to the Minister on the 31st of December this year. Slide, please. So how is this advice different from last time? The second emissions budget for 2026 to 2030 has been set, and now the government needs a plan to deliver it. Because the government now has its first emissions reduction plan in place, the draft advice is focused on building on work already underway. Our work includes identifying critical policy gaps and identifying where existing actions might need to be strengthened and accelerated to achieve the second emissions budget, but also the budgets beyond that. Reflecting that there is already much climate action underway, the Commission's draft advice has fewer recommendations than our previous advice in 2021. We have prioritised the draft recommendations against 6 aspects that are each critical to consider, and all which stem from the Climate Change Response Act. These include the potential for how the opportunity or policy can help New Zealand meet the second emissions budget and beyond, taking into account scale, scientific evidence, technology, economic feasibility and cost. Any gaps in policy, pace and timing of the action. Will the pace be sufficient to get us there? What are the risks to realising its potential and the other risks associated with action? What are the equity considerations, including intergenerational equity and the distributional effects on people? The issues relevant to the Crown Māori relationship, Te Ao Māori, and the specific effects on iwi Māori. And what are the co-benefits of actions, for example, economic development and other environmental and ecological factors? We have also used the policy framework pictured here, which has helped us assess the direction of policy needed to support our priority actions. Slide, please. This is just a quick reminder. We're currently consulting on the draft advice and we do want to hear from you. We'll be receiving submissions up to the 20th of June, and you can always ring us and talk to us too if you want to have a direct conversation. It's always welcomed. Slide, please. And again, please. Next. In our advice, we identify a range of objectives relevant to reducing the emissions from waste in New Zealand, including reducing the production of waste, phasing out the landfilling of organic waste, reducing the embodied emissions of waste, avoiding and preventing fossil fuel waste generation, and ensuring highly efficient gas capture at landfills that accept organic waste. Together, the waste and circular economy chapters canvass a range of matters related to these objectives. The waste chapter is focused on the production-based emissions, which relevant to waste include emissions generated from New Zealand from the disposal of waste, biological treatment, incineration of waste, the burning of solid waste, and wastewater. The circular economy chapter then addresses the embodied emissions from waste, which refers to the emissions involved in making product throughout the supply chain and sometimes is termed the carbon footprint. Slide, please. So the waste chapter includes a range of key messages. The first, importantly, builds on our previous advice in an Aotearoa in 2021 and recognises the importance of the waste hierarchy for waste reduction. In our previous advice, the Commission said that the waste hierarchy should be a guiding principle for action in the new waste strategy. Building on this, we now further recognise the importance of the waste hierarchy being enshrined within the reformed waste management and minimisation legislation. We also talk about it as being a need to be a requirement in relevant state sector and local government decision making. Our advice supports the phase out of organic waste disposal as appropriate diversion facilities become available. We talk about the need to release a long-term infrastructure plan for New Zealand, while the new waste strategy indicates that future five-yearly action and investment plans with the purposes of identifying more immediate infrastructure priorities will be released. We are of the view that a longer-term infrastructure plan remains strategically important for considering matters such as national and regional waste treatment capacity, considering the emissions benefits from infrastructure, and for considering issues of circularity associated with which infrastructure is appropriate where. we consider that the lack of the strategic plan has the potential to undermine the achievement of future waste subsector targets in the longer term. In relation to waste to energy, we acknowledge the experiences of the United Kingdom, and we recognise that waste to energy facilities can lock in the supply of waste as feedstock. They also have the potential to compete with the same material as recycling and hence undermine national recycling efforts. For these reasons, and due to the potential for adverse impacts from waste to energy facilities in terms of emissions, we identified the value of a precautionary approach when addressing policy and investment considerations relating to waste to energy. In our work, the major gap we identified was the need to improve the efficiency of landfill gas capture. The problem is there is no effective incentive for landfill owners to install landfill gas technology beyond the minimum requirements. The ETS liabilities are a tool applied to disincentivize methane emissions from landfills. Yes, however, in reality, emissions obligations are effectively passed from the landowner to the person paying at the landfill gate fee or paying the disposal charges. While national air quality standards also applies a regulatory mechanism to control greenhouse gas discharges, in effect, they set a minimum requirement. So they don't incentivize innovation and they don't promote the installation of optimal landfill gas capture systems. Other advice included the need to establish more data to address farm waste disposal sites. We need to improve the level and accuracy of data in this space. And we have suggested the use of farm waste management plans might be an opportunity to build up respective information going forward. Next chapter, next slide, please. It's fluorinated gases now I'll move to. And then we'll have some questions after on both of these subjects. Fluorinated gases, or F gases, are fluorine-containing compounds that are greenhouse gases with global warming potential that can be many thousand times higher than carbon dioxide. These gases are used in a range of industrial, commercial, and domestic applications, including refrigeration, air conditioning, and heat pumps. Our advice builds on the current actions in the government's first emissions reduction plan, which includes actions related to developing training, accreditation for handling alternative gases, and introducing a mandatory product stewardship scheme for refrigerants. We haven't included a recommendation in the draft related to F gases, as there is a lot of work already underway in this space, and it's recent work, and we didn't identify any substantive policy gaps. Nevertheless, our advice does talk about the need for measures to increase industry-wide knowledge and confidence in using low global warming potential gas alternatives. And the Commission also continues to support the expansion of import restrictions that target the import and sale of equipment pre-charged with hydrofluorocarbons, such as air conditioning units and vehicles, and where alternatives are available. At a higher level, we also recognise that initiatives need to come together to create a robust refrigerant management framework in terms of policy and regulatory approaches. And this framework should enable the enforcement of standards in the future. Last slide, please. I've jumped ahead. We've been through these. These are just the key messages of the fluorinated gases. And moving forward to the next slide. And this is just a summary of the consultation is now underway. Before I turn it back to Sam, I just really want to reiterate that the Commission is of the view that people should be at the heart of policy, and therefore it's very important to the Commission that our advice reflects what people of New Zealand are experiencing and care about. So we're consulting for 2 months and we'll be receiving submissions until the 20th of June, and we really do encourage you to share your views with us. And now back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Emma. I've got a few questions coming in, so I'll get started, but I do encourage people to ask more questions as they come up using the Q&A function. So I'll start off with, we talked about organic waste disposal, but also recommending action to increase landfill gas infrastructure. Is there a tension between those two things?
No, we really don't think there is a tension between those two things. Really, we're conscious that we need to achieve the optimal use and efficiency of landfill gas capture systems. And this decisions made by government in this space will need to be informed by a relevant number of factors, including a review of regulation and policy, the options that they have available to them to address this issue. They'll also need to address landfill engineering technology. So I think really critically, we are aware that methane has the potential to emit from landfill for approximately 10 to 30 years after it's been broken down. So this is why we're proposing that the government can take action in this space. Whether or not there's attention on what action is derived from the review, it will really be determined by the actions of government and what they decide to do. It's really our role to identify areas where policy attention is required. And so that's why we're providing this advice.
Sure. So we've got a question here from Robin Parrish. How are farm landfills defined and why are they proposed to be exempt from methane emission obligations?
I'm not 100% sure right now how the landfills are defined. It might be IPCCC regulations, but I'd have to go back and have a look at that. So what was the second part of the question, Sam?
That relates to why they're proposed to be exempt from methane emission obligations, which I suspect relates to the agricultural emissions pricing proposal. And if that's the case, maybe I should talk to that very briefly. That proposal, there's a proposal out from the government which introduces a basic system. Our advice is that that basic system should be put in place as soon as possible, and that it should rapidly advance to capture a whole range of inputs and emissions so that it fully captures things like this over time, and farmers have the choices of technologies and farm practices to mitigate methane emissions. So if we then talk about energy from waste, question here, your waste chapter supports a precautionary approach to waste to energy. However, the circular economy bioeconomy chapter suggests that the development of bioenergy is a good thing. Again, is there a tension here?
No, I don't think there is a tension here, and a precautionary approach may mean different things in the different contexts. So I think we know that waste to energy has the ability to lock in the supply of waste and undermine recycling targets for New Zealand. I think for a precautionary approach for waste to energy for those finite resources would mean be applied when we're thinking about setting policy and when making investment decisions. And in terms of the bioenergy, a precautionary approach might mean first establishing that prioritizing the strategic use of resources so we know what's sustainable when we're establishing these new facilities. So I don't think there's a conflict between those, but I think that precautionary approach may mean different things relevant to each facility.
Cool. Our next question's about F-gases. So what's the most significant thing the government could do to reduce emissions from F-gases?
I think right now there's a lot of work underway in this space, and they need to follow through on the work already underway. And then ultimately we've got two streams of work happening with F-gases, and one is that product stewardship work, and the other work is being done by MB. I think that they really need to come together to create a really robust framework for F-gas management, so that there are no gaps or loopholes, and then ultimately to enable the enforcement of F-gas standards in the future.
Sure. So just a reminder, I would really love to have any further questions, so might pause a moment for some opportunity for some questions to come through. Cool. So the next question's about the tension between people who want to invest in recycling and those who might want to invest in waste to energy recovery facilities. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
I think that my previous answer probably sort of recognises this tension. We certainly need to be very careful when we're investing in waste to energy facilities in New Zealand so that they don't undermine our new recycling targets and our waste reduction targets. Yeah, I think that's the key point, and that's why we've recommended a precautionary approach in this space.
Right, I think we've got one more question. So if anyone's got any other questions, I please encourage you to put them in the Q&A. So this question is, the only waste recommendation relates to landfill gas capture. Why didn't you focus more on waste avoidance and waste prevention?
I think that's fair enough. I guess going back to what I talked about in the presentation, we really have this time around focused on where are the critical policy gaps in our work. And the first time in 2021, when we provided our advice in Aotearoa, we made a range of recommendations related to waste avoidance and resource recovery that connected to the waste strategy, but their implementation goes beyond the waste strategy. So I think we've already laid a really strong foundation of work in that space, and that this work doesn't supersede it, it builds onto it. So our first advice stands relevant. And then in this advice, we further speak to we introduced a new range of things actually when we started to talk about the need to prevent fossil fuel waste as in New Zealand. We talk about the need to phase out the disposal of organic waste to landfill as facilities become online. And we identify those as needing to be they need to be objectives central to reducing emissions for waste in New Zealand. So I think we have made we do address this issue. It's just not in a conclusion, but doesn't mean it's not important.
Cool. I'd also take this opportunity to remind people to make a submission. You can go to haveyoursay.climatecommission.govt.nz, but just in case you didn't manage to write that down, I'm sure we're only a quick Google away. So we do have another question. I'll put it out there, but I might answer it. Is there any expectation that all of the actions in ERP1 will be implemented? We've seen that political change can see a halting or removal of actions to reduce emissions. Shouldn't your advice speak to this? So I think that's really important to clarify where in the cycle of our advice this particular piece comes. We have not yet undertaken our monitoring role on the emissions reduction plan 1. That will come in the middle of next year, so that's the middle of 2024, at which point we'll answer these sort of questions. But it is worth saying, as a metaphor that our chair has used, that it's like running a marathon. If you go slower at the start, you have to run faster at the end in order to make it up. So that's what I'd probably say about that. And then next question we've got is, you referred to the need for more of a focus on embodied emissions and products and materials that end up as waste, but it's not a recommendation. Can you speak to that, please? No, we haven't made any recommendations in the circular and bioeconomy chapter. And really that's because we didn't see any critical policy gaps. There's already a lot of work underway in that space in terms of developing the policy. I think one of the key messages for that chapter was that we need to move beyond
the government have made a commitment to develop a strategy. We need to move beyond that and really focus on creating a really tangible pathway for implementation for all sectors. So I think that was really one of the key messages there. We haven't made a recommendation. If you feel we've missed something here, I'd encourage you to make a submission and make your thoughts known to us, and we'll definitely consider that.
Cool. I'll just pause a minute to see if any further questions come in. Otherwise, I think we've covered all the questions that people had, so we'll wrap it up, but I'll just give people a minute or so. So we've actually got a bit of a clarification on an earlier question. Can you speak to whether New Zealand's commerce legislation allows those investing in recycling to ensure competitive waste or energy recovery facilities?
No, I can't speak to that right now. It probably would be something we'd need to give some further consideration to and get back to you. If you would like to have a conversation with us about that, please just do reach out and send me an email after the webinar today, and we can have a conversation about that.
Cool.
Thanks
you.
Emma.
All right, I think that's all of the questions we've got. So thanks very much. Really appreciate your time and answering people's questions. Thank you very much for everyone who came and participated. Please check out our website to sign up to any other online events that may interest you, and to check out your ability to make a submission. And to repeat this, haveyourSay.climatecommission.govt.nz. But to close this off, I'd like to invite Bevan to finish us off with a closing karakia.
Tēnā koutou mua koutou awhina, I tuku a mai hei tautoko I tā tātou hui me te kaupapa nei, waste and gas, anei te karakia whakamutunga. Ka hiki te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūruki ai te ao marama, haumi e hui e,
Taiki e.
Kia ora tātou, thank you.
Thank you.